Is the most disrespectful experience you've ever had as a guest? I once attended a housewarming party hosted by a friend of a friend who had just bought a new house with her newlywed husband. I was the only man at the housewarming party other than the hostess's husband and my friend, a female whom I had known for years since high school. I arrived in time to meet about 20 of the women who had come to meet the hostess and her husband and see her new luxury home which he designed and helped build since he was an architect who specialized in ecologically friendly homes and modern buildings. I arrived with some gifts. A box of some luxurious chocolate hazelnut cake, and a brand new bread maker machine which the hostess really wanted. I was then directed to put the boxes in the kitchen and then proceeded to the living room where everyone was gathered for introductions and helping themselves to non-alcoholic drinks, while the food was being placed on serving plates and brought to the living room. My friend introduced me to the hostess, Kira. I offered my hand to shake. She ignored me at first, while some of the women guests interrupted to compliment her on her new home and another asked her about where she bought her couch set or something along those lines. I spoke up to introduce myself and say my name and she looked at me sideways with her eyes and said, "Just wait your turn." She continued to talk to one of her female guests and laughed, while still ignoring my hand and me. Without even being introduced or shaking hands with Kira, my friend and I just walked over to our spot in the living room while she apologized for her saying that she's probably been very busy setting up her new home and she'll have time to talk to everyone later on. After a few minutes of chatting, Kira's husband, a very nice and quiet shy man, tapped his glass with a spoon like a bell to get started. We all bowed our heads together in prayer and blessed the housewarming party and all who came and brought gifts. Then Kira started her speeches and announcements and each guest had a chance to introduce herself and say one interesting fact about herself. When it came to my turn, Kira interrupted me and said, "We all know who you are, so let's move on to the next guest." She introduced herself before I could even finish saying my name. I stood there speechless but just smiled, not knowing what to say. My friend who brought me just held my hand and smiled at me as if to calm me from being angry. After introductions, Kira offered a tour of her new home and we all followed her from room to room, admiring all the decorations and even complimenting her on all the amazing ecological things she pointed out, like the triple layered windows that allowed the sun to heat up rooms and 1-inch floor tiles that were made with recycled materials that helped to retain heat, as well as her heating vents that allowed heat from her clothes dryer to be directed to other rooms and items like that. I asked some questions about various items out of curiosity and how they were ecological, and my questions were completely ignored by Kira, who clearly was bothered by my questions or perhaps hearing my voice. When I asked about what certain switches were for and other details, Kira politely reprimanded me saying, "Don't touch anything," which she repeated again when she showed her gray water recycling system for the toilets and for use in their garden and greenhouse room that held many plants and had an indoor bed of vegetables growing under a large slanted window which made up much of that room's wall that allowed sunlight in. Kira's husband quietly told me about what some of the switches were for and I was impressed by the ecological alternatives and money and energy saving benefits with everything in the house. Finally, it came to serving all the treats and food that we brought and gifts were opened, and many of the women awed and ummed when my sinful chocolate cake with hazelnut cream was placed on the dining room table near the living room, and as gifts were being shown, some of the women complimented on the new bread maker machine and said how they wanted to buy one. I knew that Kira liked to bake things and bring them to church sales and fundraising events. When my friend who brought me mentioned that I brought the bread maker, Kira snapped with a laugh. Only a man would bring such a sexist gift. Not all women are destined to stay in the kitchen. Didn't hear any thank yous, and Kira's husband spoke up and said how he loved all the varieties of bread that his own mom used to make and how she'd add nuts, raisins or berries and even add coffee or tea to make wonderful flavors of bread. I simply ignored the insult and tried hard to not say anything since I was in her house and I didn't feel it was my place to defend myself or argue. As a gentleman, I let all the ladies be served first, whether it was cake or salad or chicken wings. When I was finally served, I was really impressed with some black and spicy chicken on skewers which I thought were really delicious, and when I asked who made these and what was put into the recipe, the hostess snapped so rudely, "If you don't like it you can leave, we didn't make this food just to feed you." I nearly choked and I tried to speak up about how much I liked the chicken skewers, wanting to get the recipe so that I can make them at home. She interrupted me before I had the chance to respond, snapping, "Be quiet or leave." I was speechless and I started to fight back tears. Kira's husband quietly walked over and started to rub my shoulders and told me I loved the chocolate cake that you brought over. I then grabbed the bread maker still in the box unopened and I headed for the front door where my jacket was in the front closet. Kira yelled at me saying, "Put that back, it's not yours to take." I then turned around and yelled back, "Yes it is. I bought it and there's no way in hell I'm spending $250 in taxes on an appliance for someone who has been so rude to me." And I grabbed my jacket with my friend following me as she apologized and tried to calm me down as we headed for the door with Kira following me. As walked out and down the pathway to the sidewalk, the hostess yelled, "Don't you ever come back here again. You're not welcome in my home." I just turned and yelled back, "Fuck you and your home. I don't know how you managed to get such a nice man to marry a vile jerk like you, but I hope he gets to keep this house when he finally divorces you." And then I left with my friend who was on the verge of tears. I stopped attending the church we shared on Sunday but did keep in touch with my friend. I didn't know angry words were a prophecy of what was to come. Kira's husband divorced the jerk after 1 year of marriage on grounds that she was abusive and at times nearly violent, and she also had an affair with one of his co-workers who had been to his home on many occasions. The husband kept the house he designed and he wasn't required to pay any alimony to his ex-wife either. I hadn't kept in touch with him but saw the architect years later in a shopping mall with a beautiful pregnant wife and his 2 kids, and he was happy to see me again. I later learned from my friend that the ex-wife was divorced a second time and she had been charged and tossed in jail for a few months for domestic violence and felony abuse. She now works as a waitress in some hotel and has lost the right to see her only daughter. So, I guess it pays to be nice, and mean people lose a lot more in the end.